Is everyone ready?
Best
Okay.
we can tell.
All right. I'm going to. Okay. I'm going to call the special meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Riverwoods to order, please. And we are called to order. So if you'll begin by standing with me and saying the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton,
Here.
trustee Dickon. Here. Trustee Eastman,
Here.
trustee Hollander,
Here.
trustee Jamerson,
Here.
trustee Smith,
Here.
President Ford.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. As you all know, this is a special meeting that has one item on the agenda, and that is the consideration of the request for the Lexington Homes proposal. I'm going to begin with some comments regarding procedure and protocol for our meeting. As we start the meeting, we will get a status of the village attorneys and consultants review regarding stormwater, access road, traffic circulation, retention, detention design, landscaping, site plan density, and affordable housing. The board will then hear the presentation from Lexington. The trustees will then begin their questioning to include questions to their consultants. Visitors may address the board, but the 3-minute per person time limit will be observed. And as stated on the policy that's posted on the wall, unless the board decides to allow more, total comment time will be 30 minutes. Again, there's a policy posted on the board wall that we have not been strictly observant for, but I think it makes sense for us to start observing that. The board can, at this point, if it wishes to move forward, they would direct the village attorney to prepare the appropriate ordinances and other documents. I am hopeful that we will not have any late night decisions. I'd like our meeting to end by 10, and we'll take a check at 9:30 to see where we are with the board and how they'd like to proceed. Continuation of proceedings. Assuming the board does not direct the village attorney to prepare the appropriate documents, we will continue the discussion at the next board meeting. However, trustees Jamerson and Dickon have indicated that they will not be able to be present at the June 6th meeting. Historically, the board has offered the courtesy to its members that on issues which the trustees wish to speak or vote, they will be put over to the next meeting. If the board does direct the village attorney to prepare the appropriate documents, we will put this on the agenda for the June 6th meeting. Again, our two trustees have indicated that they will not be able to be present, and history and courtesy has indicated if they wish to speak on this matter, it will again be put over. In any event, any decision regarding the Lexington proposal is likely to be taken up at the June 20th board meeting, unless a special meeting is called prior to June 20. Please bear in mind that every effort is going to be made to have a full board present to vote on the Lexington decision. Ordinances concerning rezoning and the special use will be addressed first. Following that will be discussions and votes concerning the availability of TIF support. Those TIF discussions may begin as early as June 20 and may extend over 30 to 90 days as they involve discussions with Lake County for its contribution toward comp storage costs. For your information, the July 4th meeting has been canceled and may be rescheduled according to the availability of our trustees. The next scheduled July board meeting is July 18. So with having those comments out, I would like to continue our meeting. And the first order of business is the consideration of a request of Lexington Homes for a zoning text amendment, reclassification of the Federal Life property to a 1R district, special use for multiple family housing, and preliminary subdivision plat for approval. As I said, we will begin with a summary of where we are, starting with our village attorney and then speaking with our other consultants.
I thought it might be helpful to start at the beginning of the meeting, just to allow each of the village consultants who have worked on various aspects of the proposal to tell you what they have determined. That we didn't include, there's a long history of communications, review letters, things that have gone on for quite some time. So I thought it might be useful to just have an up-to-date summary of things. So Carissa, I just put you first because stormwater was first. The applicant, the developers here will go through their presentation and show changes, any changes since the Plan Commission, but I don't think those have been material. So most of what we're talking about is the review of the plans that were submitted in connection with the Plan Commission and the hearing. So Carissa, just a brief overview of stormwater compliance with our requirements.
Good evening. So typically any development within the county is upheld to the WDO, which is the Watershed Development Ordinance. And so when we review the plans, we review it as if it's any development. And basically what it is the current site has a stormwater management system and it's released at a certain rate. And anything that comes in the development needs to meet the requirements of the WDO of that release rate, which is usually at or below the existing release rate. That goes back into the calculations of detention required, which is a reflection of the total impervious areas that is now going to be developed on that site. And so we have gone through the existing conditions, all the calculations for the stormwater of the existing, and we have then put upon them the proposed requirement per the WDO, and we have discussed what they're proposing and where they're going pending how this goes forward. And they acknowledge and understand the regulations, and they're meeting those regulations, which we have to uphold as a certified community. So as it stands right now, we do not have any issues with the stormwater that they proposed, but that's all pending on a final site plan.
Okay, I was just going to keep going down the list unless anyone wants to stop. Steve, if you might have to move over to a quick microphone. Steve reviewed for compliance with the Woodland Protection Ordinance, the general landscaping, and some of our requirements for native buffering.
Yes, thank you. So as a village ecologist, what I do is I review plans that come in related to how the site conditions and what's being proposed meet or do not meet the village's tree and woodland protection ordinance. And in this case, it's mostly related to the woodland buffer that's on the north side. The village ordinance allows 20% removal of woodlands for various purposes, and as proposed, I believe it's 19.5% or something like that. So it does fulfill that requirement of being under 20%. But again, pending, like as Carissa said, the final plan submittal. The other thing that I've been involved with is helping provide recommendations for the detention basins that are going to be on the west and south side, and making sure that they're constructed in a way that they're going to be naturalized detention basins with native plants, with slopes that are shallow enough that maintenance can be done, sort of so that they fit more of the mold of what Riverwoods is about with nature and natural areas.
Okay. The next item in the list goes back to you, Carissa. It's the access road and traffic circulation. I'm sorry, I didn't notice that before.
This is a joint venture between Lee and myself. So the connecting road from Deerfield into Colonial Court upholds the traditional lane widths that would allow for the amount of traffic to go through at 12-foot lanes with curb and gutter and your typical traffic system. Going into the site, we have taken a look at trying to reduce the amount of impervious per the roads while allowing still adequate flow of traffic. Again, really trying to minimize the requirement for the road widths to reduce the impervious for the traffic going through. And then I don't know, do you want me to pass it to Lee?
Someone of the trustees had asked me a question about fire truck access. There are some turning diagrams in the traffic report which show how the various emergency vehicles would turn the site. Do you have any comment on those?
What I've seen, they've met them. I also know that obviously it is pending review from the fire department.
They
But
have
right
to-
now, what I see, they're not running over curbs. They're not going to run into potentially parked cars that are parked legally. They're able to make the turning radiuses, at least with the vehicles that they provided.
Okay. It's up to Lee. So Lee Brown, as some of you know, is with Tesca Associates President and also acting as our village planner. And Lee, your topics are site plan and density.
So we should recognize that there has been substantial change over months. Each of those changes responded to the comments that staff has made to the developer and the developer's response to what was originally a plan unit development that's needed or sought substantial exceptions from the standards, now is not and does not require those exceptions. And part of that has been the modifications of circulation and the locations of the buildings so that they no longer need setback or other exceptions. So each of those has been aimed at providing appropriate and legitimate access to the units themselves to minimize the amount of impervious surface on the entire site, to make it safe for pedestrians and, where practical, connect sidewalks and circulation for something other than vehicles. It also involved how do we enhance the site as much as possible by creating as much open space? And that changed over time when originally there was access from Deerfield Road on the far eastern site. That was eliminated. The ultimate design, and there'll be more details on that coming, includes a sort of central feature that is both providing legitimate circulation, safe circulation, the potential for water infiltration into the ground through a rain garden in the middle, and open spaces that are available to the community. The other, trying to think of the other, recognizing all of this it's a difficult site, and the developer has address the issues of both the needs of the county's stormwater calculations and their own. And so the result of which is that fairly significant stormwater on the western side of the entire site, split by the access provided to Colonial Court.
Any questions that
The trustees have any questions? I'm
Oh.
sorry, trustee Hollander?
You asked to have Tesca address the issue of density. Maybe you can do that.
The density meets the zoning that is being requested, meaning that there is no exceptions requested for the total number of units as calculated on the basis of the zoning that's requested. This is actually lower than original. The total number of units is lower than was originally requested, in part because the number, we address density in two ways. One is, how does it meet the standard of the zoning ordinance, and how does it create a livable environment for the community itself? And in the end, by reducing the total number of units and locating them as presented, we think that there are legitimate usable open spaces for this new residential community.
The trustees have any other questions? Trustee Jamerson?
I just want to make sure clarification in my mind. The 7,000 square foot per unit is currently in the R1 district ordinance.
one
Yes.
R?
Well, I'm sorry, 1R. That is the current, we're not changing that with anything we're doing if we do anything,
You're
correct?
remapping to establish that district on this site, but you're not
No, I get
changing.
that, but we're not changing anything in our current zoning ordinance.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and then question for Steve. Even though they can, and this would be true with any property owner, if they want to take 18, 19 and a half, 19 and 3/4% of the existing woodlands out, there will be a fee associated with that as well. Unless either that or either a fee or inch for inch.
There's a fee associated if the trees that are removed from the protected woodland are protected species
Right.
that would require mitigation fee.
Right.
Correct.
Can they do an inch for inch?
Planting, you mean?
Yes.
Well, so typically in Riverwoods, we've got a program where we call it ecological mitigation, and it's not necessarily tree planting. It's doing other things in the woodland to protect its health, like removing invasive species and things like that. But tree planting can be part of that.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
The last topic I had here, let's see, stormwater, access road, traffic, detention design, landscaping, site plan, density, affordable housing. I know I discussed with the Plan Commission, and I don't know how many of you on the board are aware of this, so I just wanted to give a quick summary. We've had some conversations with community partners for affordable housing organization that does a lot of work with Highland Parks Housing Commission. They administer quite a few affordable units in Highland Park. The director is Rob Anthony, and had a couple of conversations with Rob. He indicated that his organization would be quite pleased to administer affordable housing program for Riverwoods. The developer's proposal is to include 3 of the 54 townhomes on site as affordable units. And for those units, there would be a set of restrictive covenants recorded against the unit that define and regulate the income eligibility of the people who can live in those 3 units. The role of Rob Anthony's organization, Community Partners, would be that on behalf of the village, they would find tenants, vet them, give them training courses, qualify them. This is pretty much the bread and butter of what they do. Rob suggested that we not reinvent the wheel. There's a series of restrictive covenants that they've been using in Highland Park and his organization is familiar with those and knows how to apply them. And so his suggestion was that if we got to the point where this project was approved and we had affordable units, that we approach his organization. They do get a stipend annually from Highland Park, but they manage many more units than what we're talking about. When I mentioned that we had so far 3 units, he said, well, that's almost a minimus, but they would then basically help us with preparing the restrictions based on the model that they're already using. And then with some kind of agreement with the village, fairly informal, even from what I gather, they would be quite pleased to help administer those 3 units. And so when someone wants to sell them, there's a calculation as to how they're affordable. There are a number of, if you look at these documents, there are 40 or 50 pages of restrictive covenants, but they have a lot of experience working with them. And so the village wouldn't have to do it. For the remaining units that are the developers proposing not to have on site, they're proposing in their materials a fee in lieu of $125,000 per unit, which was the in lieu fee that had been levied in Highland Park until recently. I think it went up to $175,000 at the beginning of this year. But the Highland Park has an affordable housing ordinance, so does Northbrook, so does Wilmette. In the absence of an ordinance, we had a goal, which was set forth in our affordable housing plan, that 15% of new units should be affordable. But we don't have any kind of financial incentive payment. We don't have a density bonus, and nor do we have anywhere an ordinance that says what the fee in lieu would be. So the developer, at the time they came into us, originally proposed matching the fee that was then the applicable fee elsewhere. Of course, that's up to the board to decide, and whether the mix of on-site units and off-site units is another question. But the proposal for 3 on-site units is one that we can manage with a group such as Community Partners, and I have a pretty high degree of confidence that they could do that for us and appropriately administer the regulations. So that's, I think.
Okay. Trustees, any questions at this point? You will have another opportunity as well to ask questions of our consultants. But
sorry.
Trustee Eastman and then Trustee Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, this is something that I noticed when I was, looking at the Plan Commission's report, and it made me think about, do we need to hire an additional consultant just so the board might have a little bit more understanding in this area? So under the standards for Plan Commission, and I understand that it also applies to trustees, it says no special use shall be granted by the village board unless the special use, and there's 3 standards, and it says will not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood in which it is located. So I guess my question is, ensuring our due diligence, do we need to do, and I saw that this was, part of what was being done with the Baxter situation in Deerfield. Do we need to hire an evaluation consultant so we have a better sense of, is this going to impact housing prices in Meadow Lake or other surrounding communities?
There's a substantial body of evidence that developments like this do not affect housing values. This is a debate that's gone on nationally for quite some time. And I could ask Lee Brown to speak about that too, because he's been advising communities all across our area on comprehensive plans in which often there are stated goals to increase the supply of affordable housing. We can also ask the developer to speak to that issue. It's their burden to provide information about that.
That'd be useful.
In terms of the payment in lieu, I don't know how much study the other communities put into it. The time-honored tradition is to copy what someone else has already done to some extent.
Sure.
So I don't. We can get more advice on that, but we could even ask Rob Anthony or someone who's in that line what they think is helpful.
As we work through this, why don't we keep that in mind? And if we feel the
I
need,
would just say put
if
that
we
on
feel
put
the
that on
need,
the list
yes.
of if we get closer to making
Absolutely.
a decision that, we should
if
have
the
some
board, yeah,
better understanding and what that is TBD.
sure,
Okay.
sure.
Thank you.
Trustee Smith?
Really, my question was around the in lieu. How is that managed? Is that held separately in a separate account? How do we make sure the dollars aren't mixed? Then would community partners or somebody like that help us figure out how to use those dollars?
One of the non-for-profit housing groups would be delighted to have a contribution. And, the board has to decide. I mean, we can decide as a village that we want to hold the money for only the purpose of housing. That would be its intent. And then we can explore what we can do with that. We haven't as a village before, so I don't think we know. But there are other organizations, obviously, that, do depend on grants and donations as well. Rob Anthony suggested, just as an aside, that you could use that money to try and acquire another housing unit in the village.
If there are no other questions on the part of the trustees right now, then please, Lexington Homes, if you would like to begin your presentation.
Regretfully, if we lower the lights, the streamers can't see anything. So I apologize, we can't.
Mayor, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. My name is Hal Frank. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Meltzer, Pertil, and Stell. My office is at 1515 East Woodfield Road in Schaumburg. I'm pleased to be before you this evening on behalf of Lexington Homes. As you know from reviewing the Plan Commission's report, we've been working on this project for many, many months, over 6 months. And with that in mind, I'd like to begin by thanking all the members of the Plan Commission and thanking your staff, your attorney, and others at the village who've devoted a lot of time to this project. And as was indicated by several of your, or a couple of your consultants already, actually all 3 of them, the plan changed dramatically over time as a result of input we got from the Plan Commission, village residents, and of course, the village's team of consultants and its attorney. So what we're going to do this evening, I know you've already received a very comprehensive report from your Plan Commission, and we really thank them and appreciate the chairman of the Plan Commission and the members of the commission for that very thorough report. We're going to run through a kind of a high level overview of what we presented to them at the last Plan Commission hearing. And we're also going to share with you some changes that we've made to the plan in response to what came out of the Plan Commission hearing process. We are also tonight going to try to address that question about property valuation. And some of the other things you've already talked about, I'll address as we go through our presentation. So if I could, next slide, just to remind everybody who's been at the Plan Commission process, Lexington, put together an excellent team of consultants, high level, very experienced consultant team that has worked on all the different issues that Mr. Hubbard just talked about. Nate Weinsma has been at every meeting. He's obviously the representative for Lexington Homes, and he's here this evening. The engineering has been done, which, as you just heard, is a very significant component, and you know this, of the whole project has been done by Hager Engineering. Todd Schaefer is here this evening to address any specific questions you have about engineering. Sharon Dixon is the landscape architect for the project, another very important component of the project, given the unique nature of the village. Sharon is also here with us this evening. Our traffic consultant is KLOA Inc. Louis Abuna was the lead consultant on that. Unfortunately, he's out of the country, but Javier Milan is here from KLOA in case you have any questions about traffic. Those are the individuals that we have that are joining us this evening. Next slide, please. So I don't think anybody needs much orientation to the property, but the property we are talking about is known as the Federal Life property. Federal Life Insurance currently occupies the building there, the office building. It's a little over 9 acres. It's on Deerfield Road, as you know, just north of Deerfield Road. Next slide, please. Here's an aerial view that shows you where the building is situated, in both in relationship to Deerfield Road and to Meadow Lake, and gives you a good indication of what the woodland area looks like when it's in season, if you will. Next slide. This slide indicates how and where the property is zoned. Again, as you know, Lexington has applied for a rezoning of the property to the 1R residential district. Property is currently zoned in the office and office 1 research district. As you can see, the property is the requested zoning classification 1R is consistent with the zoning of Meadow Lake to the north. It's compatible with the R1 zoning to the east, and to the west is Colonial Port commercial development, which is zoned in the B1 district. Next slide, please. One of the relevant issues when a request is submitted to a municipality to rezone a piece of property is the conformance of what the requested zoning is to the village's comprehensive plan. What you have in front of you is a snapshot of the land uses contemplated in your comprehensive plan. And as you know, as it stands right now, it identifies the subject property for office campus use. However, one of the other things that we discussed with the Plan Commission, next slide, please, is a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan, which the village has already been considering for a period of time. And as is noted on this slide, the concept of changing the land use category in your comprehensive plan, and as I know all of you know, the comprehensive plan is just a guidance tool. It doesn't establish binding requirements. It's not like the zoning ordinance. It's not, what I like to say, it's not the law of the land. It is a planning tool, but it is important, obviously, and it is relevant to a lot of things, including a request to rezone property. So Long before we began our process, the village began a process to change the designation in the comprehensive plan for the Federal Life property to a mixed-use overlay category of land use. This board has not yet acted on that amendment. That's why, as it's indicated here, it still says, it says proposed amendment, but that concept has gone through your plan commission a long time ago, as you can see, over a year ago. And the plan commission unanimously recommended that the designation for the property in the comprehensive plan change to this mixed use overlay category. Now, what does that mean? As it's indicated up on the screen here, the mixed use overlay category is intended to encourage consideration of office, business, and residential uses, including multifamily development that works harmoniously to benefit the larger planning area. As you'll hear as we go through our presentation, and again, as we emphasize that the Plan Commission, and as all of you know, there are many forces that are needing to be taken into consideration here in the planning of this site, many of which go to the larger planning area. Most notably, of course, the planned improvement to Deerfield Road. Next slide, please. So again, as I just indicated, we're proposing, the current zoning is ONR1, Office and Research District 1. We're proposing rezoning to the 1R residential district with a special use for multifamily housing. That is an authorized special use already in your zoning ordinance. We're not asking, we haven't sought any amendments to the text of your zoning ordinance in order to allow for that. The concept of a special use for multifamily housing in the 1R district is already in your ordinance, and it's in that section of the ordinance where the 7,000 square foot of land area per dwelling unit is established. That is what creates the density limitation that Lee Brown was talking about. So here is the plan as it sits before you this evening. Well, actually, let me take that back. Here is the plan that was voted on and recommended for approval by the Plan Commission. As you know, this was 6 months after, a little over 6 months after Lexington submitted its initial plan, which contemplated the development of the property with 69 townhome units and a substantial encroachment into the woodlands to the north. So this is the 54 unit plan that we presented at the end of the hearing process that the Plan Commission voted on. It shows you again what was referred to earlier by the village consultant team, a couple of naturalized 4-to-1 slope basins. These basins, as you heard earlier, are important both to the construction of the proposed Deerfield Road improvements and the construction of this development. Those have also changed in design dramatically since the original petition was filed with the village. Next plan, please. Next slide, please. So as I indicated earlier, pursuant to the Plan Commission's recommendation and based on what we heard at the Plan Commission from the neighbors and from the Plan Commissioners, we have made some changes to the plan, which we're now showing before you for the first time. First of all, we're now proposing to add a fence in the northwest corner of the property to establish somewhat of a boundary, if you will, to prevent people from accessing the Meadow Lake community to the north. That will connect up to an existing fence on the west property line, which is at the rear of the commercial development to the west. We've also in the woodland area taken out the pedestrian path that had at one point been added to the plan. So we've eliminated the woodland path and a footbridge access to it, again, to discourage any residents from going closer getting closer, encouraging them to get closer to the property boundary and ultimately the Meadow Lake community. Then finally, we have the engineers and the landscape architects have determined that it could be possible to add evergreen tree screening at the south end of the woodlands, north of the townhome buildings. You can see those evergreen trees noted on this plan. Again, those did not exist on the plan that was recommended for approval by the Plan Commission. And as you know, the Plan Commission did make some recommendations about supplemental landscaping. And so we're responding to that. There's another recommendation they made that we think produces challenges that Sharon Dixon can address when she addresses you. But we do think that over time, those additional evergreen trees, which will be in addition to the landscaping elements that were already provided for at the west end of the townhome buildings, which you can see on this plan. And again, Sharon's going to talk about them in a little more detail in a little while. We think this will be a big enhancement to the plan and the benefit to the neighbors to the north. As you know, the buildings are proposed to be situated 108 feet from the northern property line. That's just from the property line, not from the residences to the north, but from the property line. Significant setback. Next slide, please. So very quickly, we've already talked about this to a certain extent. Number two, we already talked about the request for rezoning we've made. Number three, we've already talked about the requested special use for a multifamily housing development. And obviously, one of our requests is for the approval of a preliminary plan of subdivision. One of the things we haven't yet talked about is a request we have filed to amend your zoning ordinance provision, which already provides in that section on multifamily housing developments for certain bulk regulations, height, setback area, those kinds of things. And it calls for some of those bulk, what we call bulk regulations. It calls for some of those to be as recommended by, not all of them, but some of them to be recommended by the Plan Commission and eventually established by you if you approve a special use for a multi-family housing development. So the text amendment we proposed is to just say all of those bulk regulations should be considered by the Plan Commission and ultimately determined as being appropriate and acceptable or not by you, the board, if and when you get to the point of adopting an ordinance of approval. So that was the one text amendment that was part of this whole process. At the end of the process, at the very beginning of the process, for those of you who've been following from day one, you may recall that, and I think this is relevant based on some of the comments and questions that have already been made and asked this evening. You may recall that when Lexington made its initial application to the village, not only did it propose a development containing 69 dwelling units, but it also contemplated several text amendments that would change your number one, your zoning ordinance, and number two, your woodland protection ordinance. The request to amend the text of the zoning ordinance at the time was to add the concept of a planned residential development in the 1R district, and significantly, again, to some of the other comments that were made earlier, to allow for a greater density in the 1R district. So with the revised plan, those text amendments went away. So we're not seeking to have you amend your text of the zoning ordinance in those respects anymore. In addition, in order to achieve the goals of the stormwater management, the county needs, the village, our needs, etc., we have proposed to amend the text of your woodland protection ordinance to allow for more than a 20% the removal, which is what your ordinance allows now under certain conditions and with certain requirements being fulfilled, as Stephen Zimmerman indicated earlier. The initial plan, as I told you, removed a substantial amount of that woodland area, which I'm going to show you on another slide exactly where that is. But your ordinance doesn't even allow for that. And so we were proposing at the time a text amendment to make it possible, not to grant that relief, but to make it possible for you to grant more than the 20% or 25%. You can seek a variation of 5% under your ordinance. We were asking to go even further, and that didn't set so well with the Plan Commission at the very first meeting, the very first public hearing session. So that went by the wayside. So we're no longer looking to amend any text amendments, any amendments to the text of your woodland protection ordinance. We're no longer seeking those two amendments to the text of your zoning ordinance that I just mentioned. The only amendments to your ordinances that we're seeking now is this one that would give you the ability to establish these bulk regulations that I mentioned before for this development. Next slide, please. So this was the set following up on that concept. This is the slide that presented those bulk regulations that was considered and acted upon by the Plan Commission when they created, when they voted and when they prepared the report. So for example, again, as I just indicated, these would be then the bulk regulations that would govern this development should it be approved by you. So it creates the distances between buildings, front to front, back to back. It creates setback requirements from the main road and on the motor courts along the access drive. It establishes a maximum building height, and then it creates all the yards. The minimum front side yard adjacent to street, and rear yards for the development. So by approving the text amendment, this is what it would give you the authority. And in fact, it would require you, if you were to approve a special use for a multi-family housing development, it would require you to establish these bulk regulations. So this is why we are presenting this to you this evening, so that you understand why that text amendment was requested and what would need to be incorporated into an approval for a special use for this type of development. Next slide, please. So again, the village attorney summarized for you what the proposal has been. We've tried to not only advance with this development, we've tried not only to advance the village's goals with respect to providing the necessary stormwater, the stormwater detention that will be needed for the construction of the Deerfield Road improvements by Lake County. We've also tried to further a village goal of advancing affordable housing options in the village. So as you heard earlier, we have followed what has basically been set as the rule pretty much across the North Shore, both in those communities that have adopted an inclusionary housing ordinance, affordable housing ordinance, which is commonly referred to as an inclusionary housing ordinance, and even those communities that haven't adopted an official ordinance, but they do have an affordable housing plan, which is mandated actually by in Illinois law. And the law, those ordinances, and even those communities that don't yet have an ordinance, they all use this metric of shooting for, or trying to have 15% of the total number of units in a newly constructed residential developments being deemed affordable. And just not to get too much into the nitty-gritty, but the State Planning Act, Affordable Planning Act, defines affordable as meaning there's two types of affordable housing units under the state law. You could provide housing which is affordable to people making 80% of the Chicago area median income, And that is considered affordable under the state law. And that's the Chicago area median, not like, I'm sure that median income in Riverwoods is higher, just like it's higher in a bunch of the other surrounding communities. But the law says look at the entire Chicago metropolitan statistical area for purposes of determining what is the average median income. The law also then talks about low income housing, meaning affordable, not really low income the way 20 years ago it was considered, but low income housing, meaning housing which is available, affordable to people making 60% of the area median income. That is, they're both deemed affordable under the law, but it's only the second type of housing, the affordable housing, which is accessible to people making 60% of the area median income, whether it's rental housing or for sale housing. And there's all sorts of charts and there's different numbers depending on, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4-person household, 3-person household. There's all different numbers. But it's only that second set that's available to people making 60% of the area median income, which counts towards the 10% goal that the state has established for every municipality to achieve. That planning act establishes a goal that every community should have 10% of their housing in housing that is deemed affordable. And it's only that 60% level that counts towards that 10%. So Lexington has proposed to provide 3 on-site units, as you heard earlier, and to pay a fee in lieu of $125,000 per unit for the other 5 units. As Mr. Huvard indicated before, and stated accurately so, the $125,000 fee in lieu fee for affordable housing was established years and years ago by Highland Park. It also has been incorporated into the Northbrook ordinance, which was only adopted a year and a half ago. They still have the $125,000 figure. And I acknowledge, as Mr. Huvard said, that recently Highland Park increased for their ordinance that fee in lieu amount. For purposes of this evening's discussion, I'll just say that, the Plan Commission recommended that be discussed. And we have no problem discussing that with the board. There was even some talk about, another consultant coming in. Maybe that's Rob Anthony, maybe it's somebody else, to give some guidance on that dollar amount. We do think, as I said, the $125,000 figure, it is still the figure in Northbrook. And I believe they specifically went out of their way to keep it at 125. But the point for this evening is we're happy to talk to you about that. And I would encourage you to talk, following up again on one of the statements that Mr. Huvard made. I would encourage you to meet and talk to Rob Anthony from Community Partners for Affordable Housing, because he and I have worked together for many years on these projects, and he will undoubtedly tell you that he can take that money. There's great value to these in lieu dollars, because he can take it and leverage it with some of these other dollars that were just referred to earlier from grants and other governmental bodies, and actually create many more units than you would get if you just required all on-site units. He and I did that in recent years on a significant project in the village of Wilmette, and I can assure you he will tell you that he took a significant fee in lieu payment there and created way more housing, affordable housing, than would have been created had the on-site units been put in the building that was being constructed. Next slide, please. So real quickly, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Sharon Dixon. This just gives you another image that shows you, similar to the aerial that's at the beginning of our presentation, of where the woodlands sit, not only in relation to the Federal Life property, but also Meadow Lake and the property to the to the east. And as, Steve Zimmerman indicated earlier, we're proposing an impacted area of about 19.4%. So under the 20% that's allowed under your existing ordinance. Next slide, please. Okay, now I get to sit down and turn the floor over to Sharon Dixon.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharon Dixon. I am principal and lead architect, landscape architect at Dixon Design Studio. Thank you for allowing me to speak in front of you tonight. Hal did steal one of my slides, so if we can go back one. Thank you. Okay, our site houses 1.29 acres of existing delineated woodland within the village of Riverwoods, as indicated in orange in the slide before you. We are proposing to preserve 80% of this woodland, in particular 80.6%, which would be slightly exceeding the minimum allowed ordinance of only removing 20%, preserving 80%. The majority of this woodland that is being removed is due in part to stormwater management and the overland flow route that works within the system of the Lake County needs, our needs, the needs of the access road that the village is requesting. So that is the main reason why those trees do need to be removed. In total on our site and within the adjacent parkways, we have 447 existing trees. These trees are a mix of deciduous and evergreen varieties. Hackberry is our most prevalent tree, followed by black cherry, American elm, and box elder. There are no hickory trees on site, which we would consider a hardwood, but there are 7 oaks, 2 sugar maples, and 7 black walnut trees. Next slide. So last week I visited the site in order to document and share some images of the existing woodland as it stands today. I am standing on the Federal Left property, in particular the parking lot north of the building, looking north to Meadow Lake subdivision. The south line of this woodland mainly consists of buckthorn. Once you traverse the buckthorn, the woodland opens up a bit. But you can see that as it stands today, this existing woodland does create a very nice buffer from our property to the residents of Meadow Lake. The enlarged picture on the right is the view looking towards 8 Chicory Lane, which is our closest Meadow Lake house to our property. It's on our northeast corner. Due to the dense underbrush, our site is much shielded from Meadow Lake homes and others, this home in particular and others. Next slide. This is another view taken from the parking lot north of the Federal Life building, looking north towards Meadow Lake. The woodland creates a natural screen and a direct buffer between our multifamily use and our single family neighbor use to the north. Next slide, please. So once you bypass that south border of buckthorn, when you enter into the woodland, it's still a little difficult in my opinion because of the many down trees, the varied vegetation, and the many newer, smaller trunk trees throughout the understory. The current makeup of the existing woodland allows for screening between our site and Meadow Lake, and it also, in my opinion, provides a natural barrier between our site in terms of trespassing. I, again, did not find it easy to make my way through the woodland. I entered it in several locations, and I feel that others would have the same thought. Thus, the woodland as it stands today would act as a natural deterrent to trespassing from our site to Meadow Lake or Meadow Lake to our site, vice versa. Next slide, please. So I visited the site on a sunny day, and you can see there is dappled light entering into the center of the woodland, but you can also see its majority of it is shady. There's not a lot of available light hitting the woodland floor. I would consider it minimal in most places. Now, this is just a sampling of pictures of the existing woodland. It could be different situations, whether you travel east or west. Within that woodland, I'm trying to represent an average. Left space, lack of sunlight, and possible lack of good rainwater hitting that forest floor limits the possibility of installing new plantings within the woodland that would survive and thrive. And so eliminating this underbrush would eliminate the natural barrier, natural screen that exists today between our site and Meadow Lake residents it's presently offered. Next slide. So this is our proposed landscape design for our community, which is named Riverwoods Reserve. Our current proposal is a plan for 54 new townhome units. And once again, preserving 80.6% of the delineated woodland along our north border. The left side of this proposed plan comprises 2 stormwater management basins. These basins were planted with native forbs and grasses and also have some areas of open water. These basins are connected to an overland flow route located in the mowed grass section north of our buildings 1 through 6, which are the northernmost buildings on our proposed site. These basins have been and will continue to be designed in cooperation with your village ecologist. These basins will be planted and maintained by a Village of Riverwoods certified contractor, paid for by the Homeowners Association of Riverwoods Reserve in perpetuity. Constructing the Northwest Stormwater Basin and the overland flow does necessitate a need for tree removals, as I mentioned before. In particular, we propose to remove 26 protected trees within this woodland, which does fall within the allowable 20% tree removals for this woodland area. Next slide, please. So per resident and plan commission comments, as Hal outlined, we have made 3 revisions to our proposed plan. The first is that we eliminated the mulch path for existing woodland and the associated footbridges that access that. We've added a run of fencing along the north of our basin. It would start in the northwest corner, tying very close to the end of the existing commercial fence that's there, and then end in the northeast corner right before the intensive woodland begins. We feel this would fill the gap of any possible trespassing between north and south. The new evergreen trees is our 3rd revision, and this will aid in further screening our site for Meadow Lake. Next slide, please. So along with the densely planted berm along Deerfield Road and an entrance monument for the community, we're proposing 2 added architectural features. The first is a decorative wood fence located on either side of the entry to each border court. Next slide, please. The second feature is at each sidewalk leading up to each townhome building or clustered townhome building in the courtyards. This brick column with an arbor structure creates a welcoming atmosphere for guests and residents and ties into the architecture and the brick accents of the buildings. Next slide, please. So our ultimate design intent for our naturalized basins is to look like this. These photos are constructed basins and were the original inspiration to our 2 basin designs. Next slide, please. Our 2 basins will be planted with native forbs and grasses and also have some open water areas. These basins provide habitat for beneficial insects and pollinators, while our proposed architecture creates a beautiful backdrop. Next slide, please. So native plants will spill into and out of the basin, creating a very soft and undulating edge to the basin. The native plants will also be planted on the basin side slopes. These side slopes are designed to be 4-to-1, which means they create a softer transition in the grade from the water's edge up to the development areas. These softer side slopes are easier to maintain and offer an enhanced aesthetic interest. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our basins have been and will continue to be designed in close coordination with the village ecologists, and they will be planted and maintained in perpetuity by either Lexington Homes or the HOA, the Homeowners Association, this new community. Next slide, please. We have several usable green spaces located throughout development. This is an overlook on our west end. It's located at the southeast corner of the North Basin, and it provides a seating area to rest, reflect, possibly read a book. This area creates public open space, which is usable green space within our development. Next slide, please. This is the same overlook, just different angle. Again, this seating area will be, it will include decorative paving, a wooden brick arbor, 2 seating benches nestled underneath it, some large stone accent pieces, and of course, some nice landscape. Next slide, please. More usable green space within our development has been created in an open lawn area that is north of Building 10. We envision this area being open for activation by the residents and community, whether that's passive or active. Could be a place for recreation or quiet enjoyment, perhaps a great place to throw a frisbee or lay out a blanket for a picnic lunch. Next slide, please. Another natural area we've incorporated into our design is the rain garden, located in the center median of our roadway, south of buildings 4 and 5, and north of buildings 8 and 9. This is a place for rain and runoff from surrounding roadway to be diverted into the central space where water can be filtered and absorbed on site. It also creates more habitat for those beneficial insects, pollinators, and helps to activate that space in an ecological way. This area, along with the other open space areas, once again will be maintained by the Homeowners Association of the community. Next slide, please. This decorative fencing with landscape flanks the entrances of every motor court, offering additional architectural interest and working to screen parked vehicles within the motor courts. You can catch a glimpse of it on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. But every crosswalk through the development, we treat it with decorative pavement, aiding in pedestrian safety and adding another layout of interest to our community. Next slide. So on the opposite side of our development, on the east side, is another central gathering area. This is located between buildings 6 and 7 and is another enhanced sitting area surrounded by some subtle farming, some trees, outcropping accent stones, a seawall, and other plant material. Next slide, please. Berms and an intensive landscape buffer are proposed along Deerfield Road to help soften the transition between vehicular and residential use. This berm is south of buildings 7, 8, 9, and 10 and offers a mix of deciduous and evergreen plant material, trees and shrubs, perennials, and some additional outcropping accent stone pieces. Next slide, please. So while the woodlands and basin have a naturalistic feel, the balance of the new community will be planted in more manicured landscaping. Even though it's manicured landscaping, we can still incorporate native plantings and native plant species, and that is our intention. All 4 sides of townhome buildings will receive landscape along its foundation and in the motor courts between the driveways. Next slide, please. In closing, all proposed landscape will be conducive to our area's climate zone, will offer multiple seasons of interest, and will be included diversity of plant species, sizes, textures, bloom, color, and scale. All plants will be selected for quality and long-term sustainability, disease resistance, and desired growth habits. The proposed plant material will enhance the overall development and the proposed building architecture. We feel the plant material will be carefully and purposely sited, taking into consideration window locations, pedestrian travel, vehicular screening, and visibility, both for aesthetics and safety. I'm going to turn the slides back over to Hal. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Real quickly, we thought we would summarize for you the benefits of the project to the community as a whole. Number one, this would provide a new housing option in the village. Number two, it would grant the resultant dedication of the right-of-way and the grant of easements that will facilitate the construction of the Deerfield Road improvements. It will result in the construction of those stormwater improvements we just discussed to make it possible for Deerfield Road to be improved. It will also be establishing right-of-way and constructing the access road that the village has requested to provide an access route from Deerfield Road to the commercial properties at the corner of Deerfield and Milwaukee. There's an existing drainage problem to the east of this property, which will be fixed. We're going to try to fix it as a result of this development moving forward. This development, as we just discussed, will result in the construction of affordable housing units and further the construction of affordable housing units in other locations in the village. And obviously, this will create new tax revenues for the school districts and other taxing jurisdictions with very little impact on those taxing districts. And most notably, the school districts. We talked about the number of kids that are likely to be generated in the future, and it's very minor, de minimis. Next slide, please. These are the Plan Commission recommendations. I'm not going to go through them. You have them, received all of them. I think next slide. I'm pretty sure that next slide, please. Yep, that concludes our presentation. But before I sit down, I would like to do this because the comment was made by Trustee Eastman earlier about, one of the standards for approval of a special use is no adverse impact, no substantial adverse impact on the value of surrounding properties. I asked Nate Weinsma if he could share some information with you that might address that issue. And so he's going to do that at this time. And he's got a little handout, which I'll pass out. You can take the mic if you want. And then he's going to run through this information. This yours.
Or new direction. Good evening. My name is Nate Weinsma. I'm with Lexington Homes. First off, I just want to echo maybe what I was earlier. Thank this board. Thank the Planning Commission. I know some of the members are here tonight, and thank the residents, the community as a whole, for the opportunity to be here tonight. We appreciate the time and effort that this has taken over the course of several months. And we thank you for your time tonight. I think we had some previous discussion related to the questions asked by Trustee Eastman earlier. As Hal said, I put together a memo for you that, and I think at the onset, we're talking about this information. The idea of a third party, whether that's sort of evaluation expert or however you want to refer to it, we're happy to entertain that and work with anyone. Most of the information that we rely upon is readily available in the MLS. And most of the information that I personally rely upon when I analyze any given market is the sold information. I don't generally hold too much weight in those properties that are currently on the market and maybe have an asking price that may or may not be reflective of the market. But what we did here is just an initial kind of base response to questions that were asked of the direct residents of Meadow Lake, and that is to look at the resales the last 2+ years within Meadow Lake, which there have been 10, and look at the sale price of each of those homes, the square footage, the average price per square foot that it sold for, and then in the far right column is the closing date of when that property was sold, resulting in an average across the board of $681,530 and an average price per square foot of $157 per square foot. Then
In comparison to that, we just have a summary of the estimated pricing for the three base models we will offer, averaging about 526,000 at an average price per square foot of 265. Obviously, it's a totally different housing type. It's a totally different product type, different square footage, different lifestyle. But from a base standpoint, and I would expect this to be true of any third party, the point at which they would start, I think, beyond the obvious. So any expert third party looking at a situation or comparison like what is being discussed on the east side of town, with the Baxter property, Saunders Road, the traffic impact and otherwise impacts of a non-residential use against those of residential properties, there's some very obvious things that can have implication and impact on property values. In a residential to residential comparison, I think the base starting point that anyone would look at is initially price per square foot. What are their homes and residential properties selling for currently, and what is being proposed? So, from that perspective, we felt very confident that our price per square foot of what we're going to be offering in the marketplace is substantially higher than what the resale market values are. So I wanted to offer this as a comparison, and maybe this is a starting point. And we can dig further into the data and information that's available. But, and this, by the way, just kind of happens to represent what information I might otherwise be talking about tonight, and that is the square footage and pricing of the homes we want to offer. So that's included in this exhibit here. With that, we're done, but we're happy to make any of our consultants available to answer any questions. As Hal said, we have our traffic consultant, engineer, landscape architect, and our esteemed attorney with us.
Thank you very much. We'll begin with questions from the trustees. The trustees can direct their questions to Lexington or to our consultants if that is most appropriate. So, Trustee Dicken.
More of a comment, not so much a question. Looking at the averages, I think when it comes to Riverwoods, we have to be very careful when we use the word average and average price per square foot. The data sample that you're looking at shows houses that have sold in the last 3 years. And, this data sample is really all over the place. You've got a house that's priced at $589,000, and you've got a house that's priced at almost $875,000. That's a pretty big gap. So if we're looking at an average, your standard deviations are not really quite there. There's no such thing as average in Riverwoods when it comes to.
Yeah, this is not a sampling of Riverwoods. This is simply relative to the map on the bottom, which is only the Meadow Lake neighborhood. So those are the only the 10 homes that have sold.
Properties, but what I'm trying to say that I think we have to be very careful when we're talking about average dollars per square foot, because these are not cookie cutter houses. They're all very different, and I'm not sure if these figures are meaningful.
Well, that gets, I think, to Trustee Eastman's point before about perhaps we might have further discussion on the need for a valuation consultant or somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Hollander, please.
I have a series of questions. My first question is, I understand that you're going to use an ecological landscaper for the ponds, the retention ponds. Does that apply to all the landscaping in the development, or is it only the ponds? Yeah, we would be
utilizing a landscape contractor for the entire project. But as it relates to the stormwater management, we would also be consulting with and utilizing a certified ecological consultant.
But that applies only to the retention ponds, that part, is that correct? It doesn't apply to any other part of the property?
I think it would apply to the woodlands as well, although we don't intend to create anything other than a preservation area there.
I would make a comment then that one of the concerns and generally in Riverwoods is the look and feel. And there is a limited amount of green space by the nature of the property. And I just think it would be valuable to have an ecological landscaper or consultant for the whole area rather than just those two small areas. It's just a comment since they're being excluded. My second question is the fence that you're putting in on the northwest side that you've added, that ends at the buffer, is that correct? It doesn't go all the way east.
Correct. Once we would identify with your consultant a terminus that is within the preservation area. So at some point at which it becomes, as you saw in the pictures, the woodland floor becomes a natural barrier. That's where the terminus would be.
Then I have two follow-up items on that. One is we have a fence ordinance. I don't think we would have a problem modifying it based on the conditions, but at some point it'd be nice to see what that fence is going to look like to see if we have to modify our fence ordinance. The second part is, are you terminating it at the buffer because you're assuming the buffer is going to be enough of a barrier, or is it the construction which is a bit difficult to go through it, or Meadow Lake hasn't decided if they want a fence or not, or you haven't decided? What was the reason for terminating it?
Primarily, it was because to construct a fence, digging post holes and so on, it would be potentially harmful to the existing mature woodland area. Secondary to that, we do feel that the woodland area itself, the contiguous woodland area from our property and Meadow Lake's property, is a natural barrier.
Steve, do you agree with that? That is, it would be inappropriate to continue the fence through that area? Yes? Okay. You mentioned that we have 125,000 affordable. You'd be willing to look at it since that number was determined when you first came to us and has changed since then. I understand, although without a commitment from you, that you're willing to revisit that. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
You also mentioned that that 10% applies to 60% of the area. What does area mean? Is that zip code 6015? Is it Lake County, or is that undefined?
10% of the village.
So the area that 60% in the area is defined as Riverwoods?
No, go ahead. There's two different issues there I think you're talking about.
Again, well, one of the tests for affordability under the statute is 60% of the area median income.
Right. What's the area?
Which is 6 county statistical area of Chicago. It's Cook, DuPage, Kane. It's a 6-county region.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because the reason I went through that is because there have been communities in the area where the community median income is much higher. And the communities have agreed that certain housing is still considered affordable because it's at 60 or 80 or even sometimes 100% of their local median. I don't know if you know what the median income is for Riverwoods. I don't, but there have been communities on the North Shore that have approved affordable housing components to developments, and the metric they've used is 60, 80, or 100, sometimes 120% of their median income to reflect the market rate for rents or purchase prices in their community.
I understand that this is a soft area and that none of us really know where it's going to end up, but I wanted to ask what the area
Right.
meant.
Right.
I wanted to ask Steve again, did you have any concerns or questions or disagreements with the way that the landscape, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name, as to what she said, Sharon?
No, it all jives with my recommendations I gave to them, but I will mention one thing about the maintenance. A certified ecological contractor should only work in the natural areas. It's a totally separate type of landscaper that works in the formal areas. They're two very different things.
Then based on that, I removed my recommendation.
Oh, well, and the rain garden. Don't you think a certified planner should also be doing the rain garden?
Yes, if it's all native plants, correct.
And my last question, that at least that I have so far, because it was free, it was asked of me as late as this morning, and I understand you may not be able to answer any part of it whatsoever. But one of the concerns that the residents had, Meadow Lake residents, was how this deal came about. And I understand this is a private owner selling to a private company, and whatever arrangements you have a contract are private, not necessarily public until it's sold. But would you be able to address the issue of how Federal Life and Lexington came to be in agreement or a partnership in this project? I think it might help some of the folks in Meadow Lake have a better understanding of how this process worked. I certainly don't know how this happened, although I know where it is now, but I don't know the beginnings. And to whatever extent you can make that public, I appreciate it.
Sure. I can certainly speak to our side of it. I can't give you too much history going back for Federal Life other than my understanding from conversation with them is that at some point in time, Federal Life as an insurance company was sold to another insurance company. So they're part of a larger entity. I don't know what role that maybe had in their decision to sell this property, but at some point, long before our involvement, they made a decision to sell the property. They interviewed a number of real estate brokers, commercial brokers. The firm that they're working with solicited us among many other builders, and in fact there was a buyer broker involved as well, so more akin to like a typical residential transaction where there's a buyer's broker and a seller's broker. They engaged a broker to market the property for residential developers under the premise of this multifamily or townhome use within your comprehensive plan. The property actually was put under contract by another builder prior to Lexington, and I don't know the circumstances of why that contract terminated, but sometime probably 2 to 3 months after that contract terminated was when we negotiated to purchase the property, went under contract. The contract is conditioned upon and contingent upon a plan approval. I think at this point, Federal Life intends to consolidate and move to another office space. I don't know where. That move and their decisions are contingent upon our actions. So at some point, there's a two-way conversation that we have on when we feel we can commit to close and they can commit to another lease or purchase of property.
You may or may not know this, but do you know if Federal Life at any time entertained anything other than multifamily housing of this type?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Other questions? Trustee Jamerson? Was that a hand raise? Or? Okay.
Yes, that was a hand raise. I have a bunch of comments, but I also have a bunch of questions. So I'll try and put them in order as best I can. First of all, under the bulk, which you don't have to flash up there, but the bulk changes that you want, our current ordinance for 1R says a building height of 35 feet. I noticed on your architectural elevation drawings that it says mean elevation of 35 feet, which is different. The mean is an average, and it appears to be in the middle of your roof line, which makes sense. So it appears that the building is actually 5 feet taller than it should be, is what it looks like to me.
Can I address that?
You may.
The village code defines the height from the grade to a point on a mansard roof being in the middle between the ridge and the peak.
That's not a mansard roof.
Or a peaked roof.
It doesn't say that. Is it
In our-
someplace else?
Let me look.
Is it in a different definition someplace?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the zoning definition.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, and these aren't necessarily all, but what about garbage? I'm a little bit scattered here, so, but because I wrote these down as I thought, but what about garbage? Is a garbage truck can actually pull down between these units? Is that the plan? Because I
think
can
it
tell you our
depends on-
garbage guy will just tear up the curb and all the grass because he does it to my end of my property twice a week. 2 different trucks. So, but that's the plan, is to have everybody have their own garbage cans. They're going to put them out on the edge of their driveway.
Kept within their garages and brought out on the contract date, whatever day of the week the scavenger contractor is to come.
Okay. In something that you gave to the Plan Commission, nothing you showed tonight, there's a student generation estimate. And I'm wondering if you can talk to how whoever, the Johnson Research Group evidently, developed these figures. I have a hard time believing that a 4-bedroom unit is going to have a total K-8 population of 0.38 people. I know it's an average. I get that. But and 0.12 for a 3-bedroom unit. Seems to me if someone's going to buy a 4-bedroom unit, it's not going to just be a couple with 1 kid. And I realize there's 54 units that you're proposing, but I just feel it's unrealistic to believe that you're going to have 5 children in that entire.
Okay.
So first of all, it's not a laughing matter. Okay. These serious questions.
So appreciate the question. Every community tries to estimate the number of children that will be generated and actually the number of people that will be generated because of the potential impact on park districts and things like that. And historically, what communities in the Chicago area have done literally since the 1970s is rely on a study that demographers have done to determine how many kids will be generated based on unit type. And it's different. They did it after years and years of study. And there was a study that everybody relied on in many communities. I don't think you have one in your ordinance, one of these tables. Do you? I don't think so.
Actually, we have one for Park District for land contribution in lieu of park. And I was just talking with Lee about it the other day. So when you're done, we can actually comment on this.
So the table that everybody relied on since the 1970s was a table that was put together by a private company called the Associated Municipal Consultants. And it gave you a table that said, are you having apartments? Are you having detached housing? Are you having attached single family housing? And then are you having 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? And they did all this based on their studies. And that's what everybody has used really for 50 years. Over time, that company, every so often, maybe every 7 years, every 11 years, they'd update the table. And many of your surrounding communities, but I don't think you do, have incorporated that table, and that company is now owned by a company called Ehlers, spelled EHLERS, and they own that company right now. And the problem with that chart and the studies that everybody relies on is that the last time they updated that table was, I think, 1996. And so what many of the communities are looking at now, and what Johnson Research Group relied on, is a more recent study, and a study that was done that many builders and many communities found to be more accurate, that was done by Rutgers University. So, and I think there may be reference to that on the chart that Johnson Research Group did. That they are basing their estimate off a table that was prepared by consultants, experts, other than them. They're asking Nate, how many units? How many do you anticipate being 2-bedroom? How many 3-bedrooms? And then they look at this study that was done by Rutgers, which itself isn't like that recent. It's not 5 or 10 years old. I think that study's 16 or 17 years old, but in many people's opinion, it's more accurate than the old ones that were done in the 90s. So the numbers you're looking at, while they may seem low to you or not believable, they come right off of a chart that was created by studies done by demographers who average out the fact that, if you have a 4-bedroom detached home, it's probably going to generate more kids than a 4-bedroom townhome. And you may have 3-bedroom townhomes that generate a kid, but you may have other 3-bedroom units that generate none. And so you have to average that together. And that's what these demographers have done they have looked at communities over years and years and years. And all I can tell you is when developers come into towns and the question is asked, everybody looks at those tables and relies on them.
Okay. That's a great answer, but
that's my only answer.
Well, then it's perfect. Okay. Thank you. I have questions on the traffic study. I stand by. Let me get to my figures. It appears, based on this is figure A. I don't know if you guys have the documents in front of you, but it basically, one of them says that during the peak morning rush hour, which is defined as 7:30 to 8:30 a.m., there's going to be 3 cars turning left out of the site onto Deerfield Road. And then there's another, right after it, there's another diagram that shows 11 cars at the same time turning left. And that has to do with the Colonial Court traffic reassignment, which I'm maybe that's coming out of Colonial Court, is the extra 8 cars. And then there's yet another one that shows the 2024 total projected traffic volumes of 14. And then there's several other sheets that show waiting time to make a left turn on Deerfield Road. And that it's the times are unacceptable. They're E and F, which is obviously, if you think about A through F as a grade, F is the worst. And I guess it's more of a comment than anything else. I think that the fact that you think there's going to be a 30-second delay, I can tell you, and probably most of these people can tell you, that trying to turn onto Deerfield Road, make a left turn onto Deerfield Road, no matter which side you're on, north or south, during rush hour in the morning and rush hour in the afternoon, these figures are not, and I know you took them off the tables, and I understand how traffic studies work. I'm just telling you that in reality, that's not going to be the case. If you can comment on that, that's great. But if you're going to tell me that this is, you took it off of a bunch of tables, then I get it. But did anybody actually do a physical traffic study? Did you have people sit out there and count? I know you can't do it from a non-existent development, but
let me answer those questions. My name is Javier Milan. I'm a principal of KLOA Incorporated. Typical of any traffic study, we have to count volumes or traffic. We use video cameras. The reason why we use video cameras is because they're more accurate than having somebody like in the 80s or 90s with a clicker counting cars, okay? So the video cameras are about 98, 99% accurate, pretty good. So once we have that data, we input it into the model. The model takes into account flow of traffic, peak hour factors, which is like the fluctuation in the traffic volumes. You do know, and everybody knows in here, it starts building up, then it's constant, that flow, then it drops down. That's where the peak hour factor comes into place. So we have a baseline, and we know that it is difficult, like what you said, to make a left on a signalized intersection anywhere along Deerfield Road. The volumes that you see in there is figure A, is the new side traffic during the peak hour, just in 1 hour, okay? Generated by the development. It doesn't mean that's all they're going to generate throughout the day, just the peak hour.
Right, 3 cars.
Making a left based on the directional distribution in the morning.
Even though the expressway is to the left.
Correct. Then you have Milwaukee Avenue that actually takes you, and all the improvements that Lake County is doing is actually making it very attractive to actually use Milwaukee.
Not to get to the tollway.
That's correct. Now, to that, we also added the traffic that will be most likely shifted from Colonial. Sorry, I forgot the name now.
Colonial Court.
Colonial Court. Because of those improvements, their access drive is going to change into right in, right out. So we need to take that into account.
Okay.
We added those, and then we analyzed future conditions. The level of service that you saw in there, like you said, they're EFs, and they're typical of any unsignalized intersection along the Deerfield corridor, trying to make a left out of there, whether you're on the north side or the south side, you're going to wait. However, besides level of service or delay, there's other measures that you have to look at. It's very easy to just only look at, level of service and not see other measures. As it was mentioned in the addendum, those delays that we actually showed in the tables, are typical and expected, those unsignalized intersections. But we also looked at what we call the volume to capacity ratio. And it's just taking volume divided by the capacity of the roadway, and what do you get? If you have 1, you're in trouble, because that means that you are basically saturated. Or if you have over 1, that's bad. The volume to capacity ratio is 0.4, so it's pretty low. And then we also looked at the queues under existing conditions as well as future conditions. And the 95th percentile probably would be about 2 vehicles, maybe 3. Sometimes when you're basically hitting the right spot, in which I got there were 2 people in front of me, and we're waiting to make a left, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. But again, it is not a queue of 10, 20, 50 vehicles trying to make a left out of there. So you have to look at the intersection in a holistic way, not just strictly a letter designation or a delay.
Okay. Okay. And then I got a couple other questions. And it may not be the traffic study, it might be somebody else. The fire department, I know somebody over there said the fire department, the turns look like they could do it. Did anybody ask the fire district? Did anybody physically ask the fire district if they thought their trucks would be able to, especially get between buildings 7 and 8? These are 3-story buildings, and they've got to get, if there's a fire down here, for instance, they're not going to park the truck up here. I'm going to bring it down somewhere around here, or they're going to be over here, but probably too far for them to handle. I'm not too concerned here, there, they probably can do it, that one, not a problem. So that, I think this is a problem. The point of, you guys can ask the fire department unless you already have. The other thing is that on the circulation drawing someplace, and I'm not probably going to be able to put my finger on it. Where they show the turning radius of the vehicles, the semis, the semi with the long trailer, which is going to be your moving trucks, most likely, is shown to actually, as he makes this top turn,
Right here.
it's actually showing on your drawing that he's going to be on the curb, making that cut. So I'm concerned about the turning radiuses. My office is an industrial park in Northbrook, and the streets are much, much wider than this. And I can tell you in the last 4 or 5 years, the semi drivers, because there's a shortage of them, are less and less experienced, and they have trouble backing into a dock. I've had to wait 5 minutes sometimes because the road's been blocked. So I'm concerned about the turning radiuses for the fire trucks in particular, but also about the landscaping getting trashed as they try to get around there. So did you have a comment? Obviously, because you're standing there.
My name is Todd. My name is Todd Schaefer. I'm a principal with Hager Engineering, 100 East State Parkway, Schaumburg, Illinois. So to address the turning radiuses, roadway widths, et cetera, the original plan had wider roadway widths, and it was a combination effort of hearing staff comments, but also our development team and running the turning radiuses to reduce roadway widths where necessary without having a negative impact on safety. So as it relates to fire trucks particularly, you can see on the plan where we have the one-way circulation with the rain garden in the middle. There is no parking on the eastern end of that hill in the middle.
Right.
From the standpoint of there, that's for your Amazon delivery trucks that are there very short term. From a standpoint of the fire truck turning radiuses, it's been submitted as part of the record, the fire truck turns going through the site, and they can circumvent through the site in the one-way fashion and into the access road. The courtyards are done on almost all Lexington projects, and we use what we call the hammerhead design. The hammerhead design is a NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency standard, where they have a minimum driveway width or a minimum roadway width of 20 feet, and there's certain radiuses. So our driveways are 24 feet from the standpoint of the face-to-face. So fire trucks can pull in, back up, and do what in essence is a 3-point turn. The other thing to keep in mind is that the buildings are 5-unit buildings, approximately 21 feet wide, which is 105 feet deep. A lot of the times from a fire perspective, unless they need to access with their ladders, they will fight the fires and park in the near street. They won't go down the motor court. They will actually park their truck in the street because the radius is less than the length of a fire hose. So every fire department is different. And from the standpoint of this design, we feel that there's adequate fire truck circulation.
Okay.
As it relates to the moving trucks are, how can I characterize this? You don't want to design for moving trucks coming on a daily basis. You're going to over-design every development that you have. It's kind of like a shopping center, designing a shopping center for Christmas parking. You have a sea of parking throughout the whole year that's unused. And you have developments coming in and taking those outlots and putting buildings there. So from a standpoint of the truck turns, you are correct. With the larger truck that we ran through, they do clip the curb. So where we show the sidewalk on the north and south side, it's intentional. It's going to be mountable curb, so the trucks can go over that curb.
Okay. Okay, I would request that we talk to the fire district to make sure they're okay with this. That's,
Sure.
So if we can do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I had for that piece. The setback on Deerfield Road, is 25 feet on the west building, number 10, and almost 35 feet on the east building, number 7. And that's really close to Deerfield Road. That's just my comment. So also, the sidewalk that's shown on all the drawings along Deerfield Road, to my knowledge, the village board did not approve a sidewalk along Deerfield Road as part of the Lake County.
It's still being shown in the plans.
It is.
Yes, it is.
And they show sidewalks coming out of the development to that sidewalk.
Yeah.
Which also looks like it goes down Deerfield Road towards Meadow Lake. And if that sidewalk's not there, which the village board did not want to pay to put that sidewalk in, it will at least keep people from going down Deerfield Road and then into, well, would hope it would keep them from going down.
Maybe Carissa remembers better than I at the moment, but I think the discussion was that with the federal funding, it was 80, 20, and then of the 20, we ended up being 4%. So it was a fairly modest cost for the village because of the county share, we were only that. So that's, I think, where we left it, but I don't.
But I'm pretty sure the board voted against the sidewalk.
I think we left it in as a design option. They were going to leave it in as a available option.
Okay.
So I don't think it's gone away yet.
Okay. I stand corrected. The bulk requirements. So is the only, I know they listed all the bulk requirements. Can you comment on if there's anything in there that is out of, is like out there besides, I mean, the height is 35 feet. And if you're telling me it's to the median of the roof, then that's fine. But is there anything else like the changes in are the setbacks being changed?
The setbacks are being changed, not from the 1R district, but if you compare to the O&R1 district, for example.
Right.
But the setback from Meadow Lake is 108 feet. The comparable in the O&R1 district is 100 feet. So essentially they can't, when the board has the ability to set the bulk regulations, it can pretty much decide what it wants. So it backs itself into the site plan. So there's nothing in that standard that says we can't approve 25 feet here, 35 feet here. It's basically, do you like the site plan enough to approve it with the setbacks that are shown as depicted?
Well, I guess maybe I should rephrase my question. I guess my question is, they're asking specifically for the board to approve bulk regulations for this development. Is that what they're asking for? What's shown on their drawings as far as setbacks and everything else?
Yes.
Okay. And I assume that you guys have been working with Lake County on the detention part, and they're happy with that? Okay. The overland drainage route, is there also, there looked like there was a cut, a section of that, and there's obviously a depression. Is there also a pipe underneath there? That's what I thought. Okay. And that leads to an outflow on the eastern side? Okay. You don't even have to comment. I got it. I'm a little concerned about the HOA when they take over the maintenance of especially the cedar decorative fencing. And I just want to make sure that if this gets approved, that there's some method for us to make sure that those things don't get deteriorated. And then the HOA says, we don't want to spend the money to fix them.
In the declaration for Thorngate, in a number of other situations, when we have any kind of restrictive covenant that runs in favor of the village, we add the village as a party to the document so it can't be amended without village approval. And we put in a section that says these are the village rights and remedies. And basically the village remedy is if you don't do something you're supposed to do and the village does it, we can recover our costs and so forth.
Okay. And then let me just run down here and see. Some of these are not some of these are comments, and I don't know if you want me to wait on comments or do you want me to make comments?
Go right, I think right now you can,
As long as
if
I'm,
you
as
choose.
long as I'm boring everybody.
No, I mean, you can,
Okay.
you will have more opportunity, believe me.
I understand that the parking, I'm having a problem with parking because 2 spaces in front of every garage. There's 2 spaces inside, which I don't really count as parking, guest parking, because, and then there's 2 spaces outside, and then there's just those 3 spaces around the circle, and then 2, 4, 6 spaces along the road, which those little cars there are not in proportion to the road, right? Because that road, I mean, people are going to have to like drive in the other lane to get around those cars. I think, yes? Because the roadway is only 30, I think you said the road was 20.
Sorry. Of course, the road is three 12-foot
Not there,
lanes.
it's only 30 feet there. Where that line is on the, see where that line is, right where the entrance is? From there to the west, it's only 30 feet. And so you put a car in there, I think there's going to be an issue with, is that true? I just think it's a long way to have somebody wait at the west end for somebody to come around. And if there's a party, people are going to be parking in more than those spaces. The police are going to make some money on tickets, I think.
But before, Todd, before you get up, you're looking for your drawing. This was a discussion point between staff and the developer through a number of sessions. I'm going to just ask.
I know Tesca wanted the, well, I know they wanted the parking and stuff reduced so there was more green space. I get that.
Okay.
But I think it's unrealistic to only have that many parking spaces. Just my opinion.
Well, then they should answer that question.
Because I think for 54 units to have 2 spaces in front of the unit and then only, 9 other spaces for people to park. And you're assuming that you're only going to have one such party and New Year's, I mean, I see a problem with that. And I'm all for green space, don't get me wrong, but I would like to, I'm more satisfied with the fence than I was before, because I do think that it's going to be hard to get through the buckthorn that's there, although I don't really care for buckthorn, but took out the path already. Irrigation, you're going to put irrigation in for the green spaces, especially the lawns? Is that something you do typically in your unit, your developments? Yeah.
So close.
Yeah,
Oh, is it?
I think our clerk is on the way with new batteries. If you want to just hang on just one moment.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah,
It works
there
now.
you go.
Good. Okay. All right. No, to answer your question, we don't typically put in irrigation systems for the lawn areas. We irrigate as necessary through the development process, through build out, and then our homeowners association typically in their maintenance, which at some point we turn over. Under certain circumstances, they truck in water in dry summer months, but not a motorized irrigation system.
Okay. I realize that the design of the garages is tight, but Tesca item number 9 with regarding the lack of a person door on that side. I agree with them for what that's worth. And I think a sidewalk, at least on both sides of the building, there's one on one side, but not on the other, to get around from the motor court to the front door would be a good addition if it gets approved. I know there was some concerns about cut-through traffic, and I know that Meadow Lake has had issues with cut-through traffic, but I think that expecting someone to cut through, I think the residents might be cutting through that shopping center to get to Milwaukee, maybe. But I think somebody trying to make a right turn on Milwaukee, cutting through here to the shopping center, through the other shopping center, is probably not going to happen, especially after they add the right turn lane on Milwaukee. So I'm not as concerned about that as the residents seem to be. And that's all the comments I have for now.
Okay.
Thank you for indulging me.
Trustee Clayton.
How many years until the site, the natural areas of the site look like the renderings? No.
Okay. Typically, we have a program for establishment, and usually it is a 3-year program. And within those 3 years, there are certain things that are happening in year 1, year 2, and year 3. And ultimately, the turnover is usually after year 3, depending on the parameters that we've established for a certain amount of coverage, certain amount of coverage of quality plant material that we want to see. We would probably set those parameters with Steve, and he would dictate that. But in most communities, we've seen a 3-year, sometimes 5-year turnover establishment.
In terms of the tree height? In terms of the tree height, how many years?
Oh, related to so all of the perspectives that we've prepared tonight is plus or minus 10 years post-construction establishment.
Okay, and with the lack of irrigation and a 10-year time until it looks like the renderings, the village doesn't have the best track record with regard to following up on that sort of. So what protections do we have at this particular point, or can we build in? I think this is sort of related to Trustee Jamerson's question.
With respect to the HOA,
I mean, if,
right,
to get to the rendering, especially if it's turned over 3 to 5 years within the process.
well, we, just as we just did with Thornton's recently, we put into the special use ordinance that they're required to do it. So it's a condition of the special use. In their case, there'll be an HOA document. So we'll have additional rights through the HOA document, including lien rights.
But the village, has the village enforced those things with regard to the, let's say, the shops?
Well, we have. I mean, we filed a suit once. We have filed a lawsuit before. They've made some mistakes, which everyone knows. We've followed up recently and asked them to sign a new 3-year restoration, with an ecological contractor, and they did. I don't know. I was just thinking about what it looks like today because I haven't been out there myself. It's not my job, but we do when there are high-profile situations. I think this is a high-profile situation. People call us. And they say, what is the village doing? And so, we use the tools that we have to try and enforce compliance. And these are going to be Riverwoods residents, living on site as opposed to a landlord. Hopefully, they're going to take more pride in their surroundings.
Okay, thank you. One other question. Do you think the attractiveness of the Stevenson School District is going to make a difference in terms of the population mix? Compared to the tables that you normally rely on?
Yeah, no, we don't generally see wild differences between what those studies portray as being the norm. One school district versus another. It's typically more reflective of the price point. So in a, I'll be gentle with this, in a less desirable address, a less desirable school district, demand for housing and a price that someone's willing to pay for the same house in two different locations, two different school districts will be reflective of that. So we expect the pricing of this project to potentially be higher than what we're reflecting as our base pricing that we anticipate. But we don't see it generating more children. It's still a function of the product type and what's attractive to that demographic.
Trustee Clayton, could I just follow up since you mentioned that? That issue came up very late in the public hearing process, and it's in your plan commission report, but just since the issue of student generation was raised by Trustee Jameson, I want to make it sure that all the trustees understand, because as I say, this came up right near the end of the public hearing process. This property is in that school district, and if there are students, any students that are generated here will go to the Aptekissick Elementary School District and Stevenson High School District, whereas as my understanding, all the Meadow Lake students go to the Deerfield School District. So they all go this way, and any students generated from this development will go that way. I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Trustee Smith? Yes.
So I have a few kind of questions and or comments. I agree with Trustee Jamerson. The parking doesn't look like enough to me, but we'll rely on you to figure that out. I counted, Trustee Jamerson, 13 parking spots besides those in the, but it might be 9. Either way, on a holiday, I agree with you. One of the things I think we need to be cognizant of is the height of the building and the proximity of the buildings to the border lines or to the property borders. It feels like there's going to be, maybe not taller than Federal Life is today, but it's going to be closer to the property line. So it's going to look, as people in Meadow Lake are looking up at it, it's going to appear bigger.
Nope.
So I think we need to be cognizant of that. And I also think that also leads then to the light pollution area or the light pollution concern. Just lights emanating out of the homes. If you think about Federal Life today, at least when it was an active office, is probably more 9 to 6, maybe 9 to 7. This is going to be lights on, throughout late through the night, perhaps. So I think we need to be cognizant of that. And that kind of ties back then to the 10-year plan to get to vegetation that is blocking some of that light, blocking some of that view from the Meadow Lake. So just once again, kind of concern about how that will impact our residents and neighbors and friends in Meadow Lake. And then the other thing is then just is that the cars turning in and out, kind of going up and down, these corridors between the garages. It's just going to create more light, once again, impacting Meadow Lake residents. One of the things I don't quite understand, quite honestly, is this whole idea of affordable housing. If I looked at, I think what you said was it's 80% of the median income of Chicago. 60 or 80, right? 80, because they each said it could be 60, 80, or 100. Some communities pick 110 or whatever. If you look at the Chicago metropolitan statistical area, average household income's like $66,000. If I saw that correctly, does that lead us? And if you pick 80% of that, that's 54, 55,000. Does that mean that the average homeowner could only afford like $100,000 home on a mortgage? How does that work? I'm confused, obviously.
As I said earlier, there's all sorts of charts, some that go to rental, some go to acquisition, and it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I like to say it depends on whether you're trying to create affordable housing with a capital A, meaning that it goes towards the 10% requirement that the state law says every community is supposed to target. They're supposed to target 10% of their housing in affordable housing. I say with a capital A, that's 60% of the area median income. And that is, you were correct, it's about 66,000. I think it's 66,000. I also saw someone told me it's 73,000, but it's not material. And it depends again on, you know, how big is your family, that kind of thing. But it's because of that I said before, some of the communities, they don't use that number. They don't use the $66,000. That's like the village attorney said, that's Cook County, DuPage County. Yep. It's every, so some of the communities say, what's the area median income for us? Okay. And as I said before, I don't know what it is for Riverwoods, but I know for some of the other communities, it's double that or more. Sure. And that's why some of the communities, they create affordable housing, but not with the capital A that counts towards that 10%. But even if it's at 80%, it's a small capital A under the state law, but it's got to use that Chicago area, Chicago Metropolitan Statistical Area, Chicago MSA, has to be used if it wants to count as affordable housing under the state law.
And you're selling these homes, not renting them, right? So does that change the equation?
Well, it for sure. I mean, it doesn't change the equation or the calculation, but it changes the numbers you're targeting. You know, rent is X, purchase price has to be Y, and they're to maintain the to meet the affordability thing. You know, it's got to be principal and interest, mortgage, principal and interest on your mortgage, and insurance. And I think utilities, and they all have to fit within a number. I don't have those numbers with me, but they're all on a table, and the tables come out from IDA, the Illinois Housing Development Authority.
If I can jump in a second, this is why you have a partner like Community Partners, because it's a dynamic sort of scoring situation. It depends on the household. It depends on the household income. It depends on and so they will establish within the requirements of the standard that they use for their purposes. They use 80% of area median income for their restrictions, and they will establish what the maximum selling price of a 3-bedroom unit in this development can be as of a certain date based on a lot of factors. And that will govern what the sell price is, which will be much lower than the market price.
Got it. Thank you. The other thing that I keep thinking about is the density or the number of units went from 69 to 54. One of the things, and I know this is probably an uncomfortable question, but I'm going to ask it anyways, is how low could that number be?
I don't have an answer for that question. I guess that's a function of whether or not this plan is approved, and at that point, what FedLife chooses to do with their property. I think it's they have owned this property for 40 years. I think they have a right to sell it for market value. If the market value isn't based on a townhome development, they'll, I'm sure, be looking at a different use for the property.
Okay, that's what I have for now. Thank you.
Trustee Eastman.
I had a question on the project benefits. It was number 5, where it says improve drainage conditions by working with village and owners of properties to the east. That certainly sounds good, but it's kind of nebulous. What do you propose there that's actually tangible?
Again, Todd Schaefer with Hager Engineering. So as we did our existing conditions drainage study, we walked the site from where water comes into the site to where water leaves. The site drains east through a ditch into the Des Moines River. As we walk the site, the property immediately to the east of us has a woodland area. And in that woodland area, there is significant down trees, dead trees. I'll use the word beaver dam. They're not beaver dams, but basically when they form, and that blocks the drainage, and that impacts every property owner upstream. Going further, there was an earthen access drive that was put in for the property owner to the east of that. And that culvert is not functioning per the original design. So we've been working with the village engineer to help remediate that issue. So from the standpoint of Lexington is committed to working with the village and the adjacent owners to come up with a solution to mitigate this problem.
Thanks.
Trustee Hollander, please.
A question that's a follow-up with for Trustee Jamerson. When you did the traffic study, did you do it for Deerfield Road improvements? Because at the exit, it's 4 to 5 lanes at that point. It's 7 lanes actually to the west side. It's hard to believe there's going to be 7 lanes of traffic there, but 4 to 5 lanes at the exit.
You're absolutely correct. We had to include those improvements and incorporate it into the future conditions. That's the same way that you're describing them.
My second comment is regarding the foliage. I understand that's a 10-year before it reaches its height, but we could, as a board, request a more mature planting, which would, my understanding is you put a more mature tree in, it's going to reach its height earlier. I understand there's an increased cost, but to what extent does that make sense, Steve?
So actually, in my experience, the bigger the tree plant.
Would you mind using the microphone,
I'm sorry.
Steve?
Sorry.
Thank you.
The bigger the tree you plant, the harder it is to establish, and actually it grows slower because it has a bigger root system that has to establish.
It shows you how little I know.
I mean, usually the largest trees you get are 2.5 to 3 inch caliper trees, which are about 10 feet tall, essentially. And for the right species, yeah, and if you get 9 out of 10 to survive after 1 year, that's pretty good.
So there's no way we can reasonably accelerate this.
Well, so that I'll let maybe if you have experience with larger trees.
That was actually going to be my same answer. We actually find that more industry standard sizes thrive and survive and grow faster than a larger tree because that tree has been impacted by bringing it into the site. So a larger tree is a larger critical root zone. That critical root zone is impacted when you dig it and move it off site.
So it was a bad idea. All right.
It was a good ask, though.
And the last one relates to parking. And I just want to make a comment on that. Anytime we have a party in Riverwoods, or anyone that has a party in Riverwoods, I believe that most houses don't have the ability to park all the cars that are there. Most homes, maybe you can park 4 or 5 extra cars outside your garage, but that's about the maximum. Everyone has a problem with parking here because we can't park on the streets. I agree that there is some deficiency of potential parking for the development, but I don't want us to think that the rest of Riverwoods doesn't have a problem with parking because we all do. And that's the good use for the village parking lot.
Yeah, well, but why create something that's a problem from the beginning?
I agree. I said, I think that it's minimum.
And go ahead, you had something else, Henry?
I agree that it's less than desirable, but I just don't want to leave the impression that everybody else has good parking because we don't.
I do have.
Trustee Jamerson, yes.
Actually,
if I might interrupt, just
sure,
one
go
moment,
ahead.
please.
I can stop.
Not wanting to rush the trustees or rush any kind of a decision. We're at about 9:45. And I know I said I would like very much to end at 10 o'clock. We do have a lot of people here. I'm sure that, there's at least one person that wants to say something for 3 minutes. We could at this point determine that we were going to continue this at a later date. And that's what I would like to get a feel for the board. If you'd like to continue this at a later date, we've got a lot of information. If you want to make, I don't know if you're ready to direct anything, direct our attorney to prepare any documents at this point, or you still have questions, or if you would like to continue it so that you can hear resident discussions again. I don't know if I'm just trying to take the temperature of the board here before we get too much later. Again, I don't want any rush decisions. I would not like any late night oh, let's just do this to get out of here kind of thing.
Well, I'll jump
Okay,
in.
please,
I'll
Trustee
jump in. I'll
Jamerson,
jump in the
please.
pool. I'm not ready to pass and to even ask for a motion to do anything one way or the other.
You're not ready to direct our council to
No, I'm not.
prepare any documents.
I agree.
Okay, we're there.
Now, can I ask my question? It's a really short one. And it should be
Absolutely.
easy to answer.
Absolutely.
At what point do you turn the project over to the HOA? How is it when it's 80% sold, 100% sold, 10% sold? There's a quick number. I'm sure.
Do you recall what the statute number is? It's like 75%, I think, occupancy. We have a pretty good rapport with all of our, they're not HOAs until they're established, but the residents who make up the initial HOA, usually we start to interface with them long before the turnover. In some cases, they've asked us to stay on the hook longer before we make that turnover. So we've done that in some cases too, but typically it's 75%.
Okay, thanks. That's
Okay. Well, what I would like to do is, again, the board wishes to continue this discussion and not direct council to prepare anything that we can vote on. So we will continue this discussion. Would the board like to hear some residents speak tonight, or would you prefer that we continue our discussions and then allow our residents to question? Thank you. Trustee Clayton.
The latter.
Continue and allow residents to question at a later date. Okay. We will be working on a later date for that. The next board meeting is June 6th. And as I said in my earlier comments, we have two trustees who will not be able to be present. And that we have in past times as a courtesy put over those things so that we can have their participation. We can indeed set a special meeting if that would be agreeable.
I'm,
No, sorry.
You told us 2 weeks ago, come back today.
So, excuse me. The board is determining how it will go about their proceedings.
I think we're probably going to have a lot of public involvement. And we want to have a full board here. And if we are going to have another meeting where it's going to be filled with Lexington, we're going to be gone about 6 weeks without normal board business, if my dates are correct.
Yeah,
So
right.
I think we might want to consider another special meeting just on Lexington to give the public an opportunity without really any time limitation. And at the end of that, based on what we hear, we could at that point either decide to go ahead to do a draft ordinance or not.
Yes.
But I'm afraid that by going 6-7 weeks without normal board business, and we do have other things going on, we're going to have a problem.
At the June 6th meeting, then we would not discuss Lexington issues
I would suggest another special board meeting.
Another
I don't
special
know how the
meeting
other
prior-
trustees feel.
prior to June 20, which would be the
But whenever
following-
you can get 8 of us, the 6 of us together.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say sometime after the 6th, but
But before the 20th.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what we will do then. I'll poll, I'll get dates. I'm not going to poll you for any decision. I'm going to poll you for availability. And we will set a special meeting specifically to continue this discussion and to hear our residents. So,
And then at that time, either hold it over for more or ask the attorney to move forward.
that's
right?
correct.
Or not.
That's correct. We could, yes, and then we might consider starting the special meeting a bit earlier. So we,
Well,
the board has a lot to chew on here. We've heard our presentation, asked questions. We've had some comments from our consultants. We will have the time to think about it and pull those things together again.
Plus, we won't have another presentation by Lexington Homes, so that
Right,
took up a
right.
lot
So
of time.
that's a block.
So-
That's a block of time as well. Okay, with that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
some of,
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, well, I asked a lot of questions. I'm not sure I got a lot of done stuff.
No, Rick. No, that was really important that you did that. I think that's a good